Welcome to the Money Minus Shame podcast powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute, where we make money human. Here, we eliminate shame from the financial experience and drive money conversations to be holistic and human first. I'm your host, Nate Astle, and welcome to Money Minus Shame. Hello, and welcome back to the Money Minus Shame podcast, hosted by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. I am Nate Astle, your host, and I am joined here with Tyrone White. Tyrone, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to get into the conversation.
What conversation are we getting into?
We're talking about different financial situations with millennials and Gen Z.
I think this is such an important topic because we've been watching the news. We know that millennials and Gen Z as a generation experience just like a far different financial experience than past generations. And I think there's a lot of big feelings there. I think there's a lot of psychology going on. And I think it's just really important that we make space for what it's like to be a millennial, to be a Gen Z, and have a very different experience when it comes to our expectations around our money, what our money is, quote, supposed to do as we get older. So there's a lot of different pieces in here that's important to talk about.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things or concerns and issues that both generations face. For instance, one that I know both generations face is student loans. Me working with clients, millennials and Gen Z have similar messages where they were told, hey, go to school, get an education, it'll be worth it. A lot of our parents had that mindset that if we did those things, that we'd make more money. But the cost of going to school has increased significantly during those times as well.
And that's something I think a lot of people don't understand. It's not just that school is more expensive. It's not the regular kind of things are more expensive because of inflation. This is 2, 3, 4 times as expensive as it was in past generations. And I think that's just not a sustainable culture where like the expectation is, well, you go to school because that means opportunity. And for sure, like you and I have done a ton of education. I'm not anti-education at all.
Yeah.
I think the problem is when we set that up as the expectation, though, without talking about things like student loans or the costs, and there's some schooling that has a higher return versus other, like all of that is nuanced. And unfortunately, at least you and I don't think we grew up in a time where that nuance was really there.
No, I agree with you. I agree. And I want to go back to like even talk about the cost because sometimes we say, hey, the cost went up, but this is for adjustment for inflation. It's more. And there's many reasons why it costs more today. We get into that, will be a whole nother conversation. But yes, it's definitely impacting us more than it's done in previous generations. And I see it a lot with my clients that student loans are having a major impact in their finances in their relationship because it's debt. It's one of the questions that I ask, hey, do we have student loan debt? Because it's just become a major part of relationship, money. It's just a big part of our culture is to have student loans. And I think it's way more than it was in previous generations.
For sure. And I 100% agree that as I've met with clients, yeah, it's an expected thing, which, it's not our place to like judge everything as right and wrong, but like we do got to acknowledge that there are effects and there are certainly financial effects. Like student loans aren't interest free most of the time, especially if you're getting private student loans, things like that to cover school rather than federal, and a whole bunch of issues with the federal program as well. What's really been interesting is just how we've all accepted student loans as like part of my life. I see a lot of avoidance and dissociating from student loans. Like it's just, yeah, that's a thing, but I'm going to bury my head in the sand. I don't say that in any negative way. It's more about just a reality of this is something that people have had to just cope with for some of the older millennials for over a decade or more. And I think that just has an effect on how we view our financial opportunities. Like when we are in debt, you and I both work with people where debt is a main stressor, it's a main issue in their life. Debt changes the way we experience the world because we either experience it through a bunch of anxiety or we don't experience the anxiety and we dissociate or ignore, push something away, then we're stuck. And it's something that I think we have to give a lot of extra kindness and compassion to with millennials and older Gen Zs and things about what our culture set us up for when it comes to school and student loans and all that.
Yes. And I want to go a little bit back to what you were talking about is trying to not think about the debt. I see that very often, not think about the debt, or I'll get the comments for some of my clients, I'll never pay this off. It's
Mhm.
always going to be with me.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it. Can we not? Sometimes I get people that say, I don't want to even include it in my debt. I don't want to even think about it. They don't want to see the number it's really had and is having an impact on especially millennial and Gen Z generations. And I think we need to try to work on figuring out something to try to work on something, either tackling the debt or help people where it doesn't seem as impactful in a relationship with people and to themselves. It's a really tough subject.
Yeah, we do need to make sure that we're talking about student loans. Even if there's not a whole lot we can do, and a lot of times there's more that you can do than you realize,
Hmm.
but we at least need to make it okay to name the elephant in the room, which is that a lot of us were screwed over with student loan stuff, and that's not fair. It's not right. There's bigger political things that potentially could help to make things right. But at the end of the day, the individual experience, we have to acknowledge that, hey, student loans is part of our lives for now. We've got to make this okay to talk about because it comes up in our relationships. It comes up in our anxiety or our depression. Our mental health pulls on the information around us. And if I've got 60, 100, $200,000 in student loan debt, that I have just accepted that I'm going to be paying off for the next 30 years, like that has an effect on us that we need to be able to talk about for
Yep,
sure.
absolutely. And something I'm thinking about is school. As I think about school and student loans and education, something that really impacted education, start impacting cost of living is life after the pandemic and the cost of living and inflation and stuff. That's something that has impacted every single generation, but specifically millennials and Gen Z as far as when they're in school or trying to get jobs or while they're in jobs. And either it was shut down for a while or, it's impacted so many people in different ways. I see that as well. One major factor for cost of living is the price of homes, how
Hmm.
long it's taking people to get into houses or buy houses if they're interested in doing that. I think the last time I looked at statistics, it was median household income is typically now it costs 3 times as much as it did in previous generations to buy a house. These things are impacting a lot of families and it's a lot of discussions. Have you been seeing that at all with your clients of like just difference in pre-pandemic and post-pandemic
Oh,
cost of
yeah.
living and stuff having an impact?
For sure. The pandemic, in my mind, that was like Gen Z's first real, like, big societal event that
Yeah.
impacted their finances. Because a lot of Gen Zs were either in high school or some of the older ones might have been in college or not in college, but the economic opportunity for so many people just shut down. I think it's important to recognize that time is the most valuable resource because if you're able to make money or have more opportunities to make money in those early years, that money grows a lot with investing and saving. But just money now is more valuable than money in the future. That's the whole point of inflation. And so, if these key financial income years are wiped out or drastically lower, that impacts people not just right now, but that impacts things years to come. We saw the same thing in the 2008 crisis with a lot of
Yeah.
millennials. That was right when people were entering the workforce. So,
Mhm.
like, we see all of these stories on the news about these challenges that impact millennials. And again, this is like a generational thing, and millennials is not a monolith. But if we look at it from the big picture, this stuff has an impact on our psyche. The amount of mental health challenges that come from feeling like you're never going to make it sucks. And it's something that I think impacts certain groups differently. All of this to say, I don't want to sound doom and gloom, but I do think it's important to at least acknowledge the hurt and the pain there. Because if we're going to be financial therapy podcast talking about the feelings and the shame around
Yeah.
money, like we got to talk about the millennial and Gen Z shame experience
Mhm.
because it's unique and it comes from a lot of different traumas that have impacted our lives.
Yeah. Something I think about as you're talking about this, and I don't want to place blame on anybody. I just think that generations experience things differently, but that we kind of view life the same, but the situation may change a little bit for different generations. And what I mean by that is we have the boomers and then the Gen X. They may have kids now in the millennial Gen Z generations, and then they still have the expectations of them having those similar upbringings or growing up similarly, like getting a house by a certain age or getting married by a certain age or doing things by a certain timeline where the generations today, mainly because of cost, may have to wait later in life, but they're still dealing with a lot of shame because the parents, the grandparents, those are their role models, having these expectations for them, and then it causes the shame that they're not meeting those expectations in life. I think that makes it very difficult for people. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that could be the case?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. Even if you just look at numbers, the average time to get married or to get your first home, some of these kind of rituals that a lot of societies had for a long time. Part of growing up is you do these things. And when that is the expectation set by past generations, it's just set by life, like in how humans have functioned for a really long time. And that isn't a reality anymore. It's really easy to feel like, okay, well, there must be something wrong with me. Shame is something that comes in so much with how our generation experiences money and our economic opportunities. And it's something that I wish we could have a lot more compassion for. You're talking about like how previous generations have had different rule books. Yeah, like an example of that would be pensions. That was a big way to guarantee future safety. That and Social Security, which pensions are a thing of the past. They have been, frankly, for quite a while now. Even Social Security, I grew up with messages around how Social Security won't be there when I'm retirement age. And it's possible that messaging is more just because I grew up in the household that I did, but it's certainly not a message that only I heard. What about you, Tyrone? Is that something you remember hearing?
Yeah, I mean, my parents, now they're getting older, so they talk about Social Security, and it's always interesting because I don't even think about it. They factor that in. Oh, yeah, I'll pull Social Security at whatever, 62, 65. They have their ages. And I'm thinking, like, I don't even think about that for my future. I'm thinking 401ks, Roth IRAs, just different things. But even going back to pensions, I remember having a conversation at work, and somebody from our older generation was like, hey, these kids today, they be hopping jobs, doing side jobs. They're not focused on their work. They'll have no company loyalty and just bashing millennials. At this time, it was millennials, but Gen Z was just coming up into the workforce. And you just bashing them. And I said, even at the company that they were currently at, they did away with pensions. So he would get a pension, but any new employee wasn't getting a pension. I'm like, right here, and I had to explain this. So I said, right here in the company you're working for, the people coming in are not getting pension anymore. So what's their incentive to be loyal? I'm not saying that a lot of companies who don't do pensions are bad. There's 401k match, stuff like that. But there's definitely a difference between a pension and a 401k match. There's more responsibility on the individual, which I'm not saying is wrong, but it's definitely different than in previous generations. I think there was more of an incentive for people to stay at companies, where now it's pushed more towards individuals to switch jobs to get promotions and kind of chase promotions for more income so that way they can have extra money to save for their retirement accounts.
And quite frankly, retirement as an idea, it's a pretty new idea in human history, like last 100 years or so. It kind of became the norm. But if I don't have future security nets, I may assume that I'm going to work till I die. All of these things, I think, certainly can reflect a sad state of society. But my point is not to further depress people, but is to understand our brain goes into trauma mode when we don't feel safe. And whether it's physical safety or emotional safety, our brain reacts to perceived danger. And if I feel like my financial safety is either under threat or non existent, it's going to impact the way I work. It's going to impact the way I do money stuff. Like all of this has consequence. And then not just on a big macro scale, like the individual experience is far more traumatic if I'm growing up in these types of environments, especially when the environment I'm in, I'm being told is my fault. As I'm not working hard enough, all that kind of shame stuff. And it's really interesting. I don't remember where I saw it. It was a clip somewhere, but it was showing how this idea of parents complaining about the next generation is this pattern as old as time. Like these kids nowadays kind of thing. What I will say though is that there are things about our generation that is quite a bit different, specifically with technology. I grew up with the internet. I remember the dial-up time, but internet was accessible to me. I didn't get my first phone until I was 16, and I didn't get my first like smartphone until I was like 22. But I do think that we just assume that like phones and social media and technology is way more integrated with our life than it was for past generations. And I do think that impacts the way we experience money.
Yeah, so me think about that. We had computers, but I didn't have internet on my computer until I was about 16 years old. When I got internet on the computer, and yeah, it was dial up. Those sounds, I hated those sounds. I'm glad we're past those sounds now because they were annoying. There was social media, but it was more like a screen, and people would post words and stuff. Today, with phones and social media, I do see a lot of my clients that I work with dealing with like social media pressures when it comes to finances. That's something that's unique to millennials and Gen Z is seeing people's lives or the highlights of their lives on social media, where in previous generations you see what local people did. But I just think with social media, you see it on such a wide scale now of like highlights of people's lives that it causes depression for people because they feel like they should be living a certain life and they're not, depending on what they're seeing on social media or spending. So the advertisement from social media platforms like TikTok, I see increase in spending from seeing what other people are doing or buying clothes or items and stuff. Do you see that working with clients? Do you see them struggling with social media, or do you see that having an impact on them and finances?
Advertisements and billboards and TV commercials, like these are all things that are vying for our attention. Attention is one of the most valuable commodities to most businesses. And we have devices and technology and things that are designed to be as attention grabbing as possible. Even what you're saying about what social media used to be, or MySpace, even early
Yeah.
days of Facebook, like it was more the town square kind of idea. But whether it's Google or Facebook, everything is ads. And again, it's not like ads are new to this generation, but it's how quickly we are seeing these ads, how accessible these things are. If ads didn't work, then we wouldn't have ads. But they do work. That's the point. And so when I work with clients, a lot of them don't tell me, I saw this on Facebook, or I buy everything that I want off of Facebook or Instagram. No one can do that because it's that many advertisements. But these things do tell me, like what you're saying about seeing how other people live. And like you said, it's highlights. It's the highlight
Yes.
reel. It's not their whole life. It's like watching an action movie to learn how to drive. No, we need the boring driver's ed stuff. We need the boring, like, and then you put the brake on and you shift into drive. If I'm watching Fast and Furious and I think, like, oh, well, this is how everyone does it, this is how everyone does it, I am in a dangerous situation. We have to recognize that what we see online, especially when it comes to like money behaviors, it isn't reality for most people. Even what we put out there, it's not actually representative of our full life. We include the highlights, and who isn't guilty of like wanting some attention, some likes, some clicks? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how a lot of us have been socialized to seek dopamine, been socialized to seek connection. And it's not that social media or anything is inherently good or bad, but how it's used matters. I think our generation has been socialized around this technology and it affects
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, it does. I think the biggest spending I see that's linked with social media besides clothes is vacations. So I look at studies that vacations is like once a year for a lot of families. There's different reasons, time off from work, stuff like that played a factor. Typically families went on one vacation a year. Now I think social media has a big factor and families want to do more vacations, like 3, 4 times a year, because you're seeing once again highlights of people feel like they're traveling all the time. You're like, why I'm not traveling? Why I'm not free just to do what I want and go to these places? And I'm working with clients now that are putting a lot of their vacations on credit cards, and it's putting them further and further back financially because they want to have those experiences now. I see that quite a bit in the comparison between them and people on social media.
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors. I think it is important, though, as we're outlining these problems. I also want to say there are reasons to be hopeful, at least on the individual level. Like, obviously, there's societal problems. There's a lot of things that one individual isn't going to fix all of society's problems. But when it comes to your life, if this is you, if you're in this camp, we want to at least give you some ideas of how can I start to take some power back? How can I start to heal? And part of it, I think, is starting with the whole point of this podcast. Let's start taking the shame out of it. Let's take out the part of this that says it's because I'm a failure, or it's because I'm stupid, or I'm lazy, or I didn't work hard enough. Let's take the shame out of this experience and just acknowledge it for what it is. It's freaking hard. And everyone can take responsibility for their own actions. And I think that's kind of an important thing that we're able to push into what is the part of this that I can control. But as you're taking responsibility for your actions, as you're trying to make change in your life, make sure you're not doing it in a way that's driven by shame or driven by anything other than knowing you're worthy of good things. Your value as a human being isn't up for debate. At least it can't be with you. As you're trying to make a change in your personal life or your financial life, we're doing it in a way that says, hey, there's a lot of different pieces to why my money is the way it is, or why I experience my money the way I do. Let me take a compassionate approach that's action driven, but is kind. That's a choice we get to make about whether we're kind to ourselves.
And even financially, a lot of times when I work with clients, they'll think they want to spend money, or they're spending money on things, but they actually want something else. And what I mean by that is sometimes they'll go on vacation, but really they just want to spend more time with their family. I think the only way to do it is to go on this faraway vacation, but you can go somewhere locally or just carve out some more time. Sometimes it's things like that. Sometimes I have clients that want to spend more time with their parents, and they envisioned when they was younger going to a beach and renting a house on the beach. But sometimes they realize it wasn't so much that location they pictured that, but they'd be fine going to the park with them at a local park. And I guess sometimes we're spending money on things that we think are going to make us happy when really we're searching for something else. I think that's important to evaluate. Is it really the money, how much I'm spending on, or is it there's something particular I'm looking for to make me happy?
That is a core component of financial therapy, is that often we have financial solutions to emotional problems.
Yes.
And when we are trying to solve an emotional problem with money, it doesn't tend to last. It just doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean that money doesn't impact our happiness or impact our stress and our freedom. Like, of course it does. It's hugely important. It starts with just asking ourselves, what am I really looking for? I'm tired. It's the end of the night. I am scrolling on Amazon or Target or whatever shopping you're doing. What am I actually looking for? Do I have purpose in looking? Probably the purpose is more emotional related. I'm looking to feel connected. I'm looking to feel part of the group. I'm looking to feel a little happy. I'm looking for something to look forward to. I don't blame people for that. I understand. I get it. That's how our brains are wired. That's how our culture has wired us to be. And we all deserve better than this. We all deserve better than just to be like dopamine seeking zombies that are distracted and overwhelmed by both information and by shopping and a lie that having this one thing will make me happier. Things are nice. They matter. I'm not anti-thing, but I just want us to buy things that truly improve our lives, that align with our values, that we make choices intentionally as much as we can. We make choices less out of an emotional state, which changes all day, every day, and more out of things that are core to how we want to live. When we do that, when we make those kinds of mental shifts, it gets easier. It doesn't get easy, but it gets easier to change our financial situation. Yes, even millennials and Gen Z, there's a whole lot of the stuff that's stacked against us, but little ways that you can take your power back, little ways that you can assert control over your own life, it counts. And every good thing matters. We can't be quick to dismiss our little efforts because little things add up to big consequences, negatively, but also positively. Anyway, I'm getting on a soapbox here, but let's make sure we're giving ourselves some grace.
No, I think that's important. I think everything you touched upon is important because we're naming problems or issues or concerns that generations may have. But this is also about trying to help people. And I'm hoping this podcast and this episode we're doing right now is helping people. But let's say they need additional help. I'm always concerned about that. If they need additional help, they feel like they can't do it on their own. What are some things they could do themselves, or who should they seek help from?
You know, as I often do, will advocate for financial therapy. I think it's an important part of our financial health. But if that's not where you are, there are a lot of really good resources. For example, the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute has a whole resource library. Getting more education, doing more things like reading books, doing workbooks, listening to podcasts, like the more that you can fill your mind with positive things and hopeful things, educational things, I do think it impacts the way we feel. What would happen if we tried to learn something for 30 minutes in the morning instead of doom scrolling on social media? Probably more than you think. Like I said, our website has a resource library with worksheets. They're free to download. Just start somewhere. There are really good books also on our website on different ways you can start changing your money experience. There are often, not always, but often there are nonprofits, state or local government resources you might not be aware of. A lot of cities will have things like free financial education, sometimes even free financial counseling to help you get your finances in order. A lot of community mental health centers will have low cost, sometimes even free therapy. If you're in a college town, there are a lot of different programs where you can get free things or low cost things for people in college. Now, are there situations where you get what you pay for? Sure. But knowing that there are options is better than knowing that there are no options. Try to get out of your own head and have some kind of other support. Just in general, humans aren't supposed to do things alone. That's not how we survive as a species because we help each other and we're kind and we're compassionate. And we got each other's backs. And that is how we have evolved and learned how to cope. We can't solve all of our problems on our own. So whether that's getting involved with other social groups, getting involved with your own therapist, family members, friends, whoever is safe in your life, shame dies when we're vulnerable in safe places. And that includes with money. If we really want to heal our shared collective financial shame experience, we've got to start talking about money in vulnerable ways and less shameful ways and really reconnect with others. Well, we said it once and we are saying it again. We are just starting to scratch the surface with this topic as we have with all of the other episodes, if you've been listening. As we are coming to a close of not just this episode, but our first season of the Money Minus Shame podcast, I'm having some big feelings around what this conversation can lead to. And I'm just curious for you, Tyrone, what are you hoping to see from the Money Minus Shame podcast?
My hope is that people start knowing what financial therapy is for the everyday person, that it could help for mental health professionals and for people in the personal finance space. I want them to know that financial therapy exists. Money's such an important part of our lives. And I think sometimes we're missing that piece, that it's not just about the numbers, it's not just about the logical things, there's an emotional side to it. And financial therapy brings that to everyone. And that's my hope for this podcast.
Yeah. You know, when you and I were first talking about starting the podcast and we're coming up with names, I remember when we first settled on Money Minus Shame, it felt right.
Yes.
And I think the reason it's so important to have these conversations in a shame-free way, like money and shame almost go hand in hand anymore. And it doesn't have to be like that. When I think about the listener, with professional or just regular public, my hope is that you learn to experience the topic of money in a little bit more emotionally safe way, but also that you can start to really heal. I love the idea of financial healing. And financial healing is much more than just making bank account numbers go up. It's about learning to experience money differently, learning to experience yourself differently, and have a higher quality of life. Whether we like it or not, money is a regular part of life, and we need to make sure that we're making that experience as kind and compassionate and as shame-free as we can.
Yeah, and I think sometimes us, when we're in the field as practitioners or even academics, we forget that most of the people out there don't know what financial therapy is, because we get in our own bubble. And that's what I want for this podcast. I just want to spread out and get to everyone. And I think as more people find out about financial therapy, it does bring out that healing. It brings out all the things that we could do to help people feel better about money. I think this podcast can really do it. That's my hope. That's my aspiration for it.
Yeah. This is something that you and I do every day, Tyrone. This is our job, but it's also something you and I have our own personal relationship with. quite frankly, my hope is that people get a better understanding of their own relationship with money and also start to have a different emotional experience with it. Money minus shame is really more than the dollars and cents. It's more than just talking about what you should or shouldn't do. That's not the point at all. What I really hope this podcast does is open a path forward that is trauma-informed, emotionally informed, to talk about this thing that affects all of us in a way that leads us to healing, both individually, but also as a culture. There is a lot of hope out there. When you are experiencing feelings of shame or hopelessness around money, I hope this can be a place to go to maybe learn a thing or two, but also to feel something different. Money doesn't have to be a hopeless part of our experience in life. It can be something that we handle, we deal with, and believe it or not, can be something that's a positive experience, something that aligns with our values, that aligns with the things that are important to us. That's my hope, is that you learn to experience money differently. As we are coming to a close of this season, we want you to know that we are looking for your thoughts and questions. This is something we can explore so much more and so much more in depth. So if you have questions or comments or topics you want to see, please leave a comment below on whatever platform you are watching or listening on. In the meantime, please take care of yourself. Please take care of each other. And we will see you next time on Money Minus Shame. Thanks for listening to the Money Minus Shame podcast, powered by the Financial Therapy Clinical Institute. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for mental health services or financial advice. This is a cafeteria where you can take what you like and leave the rest. Make sure to like and subscribe so you're the first to know when new episodes drop. And if you like what you hear, let us know. Reach out at money-shame@gmail.com or send us a DM with thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like to see us cover. Take care of yourself out there, and we'll see you next time.